going to drop in on LinkedIn Live today and chat with you about the recent Giving USA report that came out last week. Our team has been scratching our heads and trying to decipher the ultimate meaning of these numbers. And there's a lot to unpack. And so we have a lot to talk about today. First of all, let's start with the numbers. And they are shocking, quite frankly, and they're headline grabbing. I'm sure you've read the news that giving, I'm looking at my notes right here so I can get my numbers right, but overall, from last year to this year, there's a drop of almost $60 billion across the board in the US. So giving last year was around 558 billion overall to all sources from all sources. And this year it's right under 500 billion. So we went from 558 billion to 500 billion. That's $60 billion roughly that is not going to the charitable sector. So we all need to be very worried about that. And here's more data, okay? And I want to talk about the role of inflation as we go forward, because inflation played a great role in these tough numbers. So actually, giving was up 3.4% in regular dollars, not accounting for inflation. But if you add inflation in, it was down 10.5%. So it's really interesting to consider that we did well, except for inflation. And one of the data points I'm very concerned about, though, is the fact that we track over time, all of us in fundraising look at the macro numbers, and the giving as a percentage of individual disposable income. It's usually running around 1.8% to 2% up and down, and last year it was 1.7% as a percentage of disposable income. So we can probably agree that regardless of inflation, there was a drop off in gifts across the board in the United States. However, I will also quote from the Giving USA report that the decline in individual giving follows two of the best years on record ever for giving. So we were reaching new heights for gifts, and we were all celebrating. Giving USA came out in 2020 and 2022, and we were all celebrating. And so we need to recognize that the American public, corporations, foundations, individuals, have been coming forward, and we sort of wonder if this is a post-pandemic correction or reshuffling of the landscape. And I'm gonna park that and get into that in a minute. But let's talk a little bit more about the numbers. Um, and what's interesting is that we break these numbers down: individuals, foundations, corporations, and then bequests. And the corporate giving went up in current dollar giving, not including inflation, 22%. So corporate giving jumped back up where it probably should be playing all along. However, there have been some surveys of corporate donors saying that they're going to cut back a bit this current year. So one of your takeaways may be to really be thoughtful about the corporate relationships that you have and see if you can nurture them more strongly. And one of the areas of interest, my personal interest, is the role of DAF funds, donor advised funds, because individuals give to the DAF, and that counts as a gift, right? And then hopefully the money at some point comes out of the DAF, the donor advised fund, and is distributed in the community. And it's tricky how Giving USA tracks these. We know that DAF giving is a huge factor in the charitable giving landscape. And so the foundation gifts, which would include DAFs, as I understand it, I'm still looking into that topic, but foundation gifts increased 11.6% between 20 and 21. So they did go up. And then between 21 and 22, foundation gifts increased 2.5%. But you throw in inflation, everything went down. So this is another fun fact about foundation giving: the cumulative increase in foundation gifts in current dollars without inflation is 14.4%, and that's over a 2-year period between 2020 and 2022. So interesting to track this. Now, I do want to share just a little bit more about the numbers. I'm sure you've read the reports and you're reading the news reports, but foundation and corporate gifts went up. Giving from individuals contracted from around 70% down to 64%. So everybody, we are not doing as good a job as we could do with individuals. And I have some ideas that I'll share with you in just a second. And by the way, if you have any questions, I would love to take your questions. I'm scratching my head and still digesting all this information, and I'll do my best to share my thoughts right now. But let's talk a little bit about the role of inflation, because you have donors who are giving $100 a year to you, $1,000 a year. They're devoted, loyal donors. They always make this gift. They made their same gift, and they were happy about making their gift. However, if you throw in inflation, their gift went down. So I think inflation is the big bugaboo in this report that distorts the efforts that we are making, and also the gifts that our donors are making. And for example, the healthcare sector gifts went up 5.2% from 2021 to 2022. Yet when you factor in inflation, gifts to healthcare went down. So we're doing a good job, everybody. We're doing a good job. We're stewarding our donors. We're keeping our donors. And I think the challenge is trying to find new gifts that are and get more gifts from our current donors to account for this terrible impact of inflation. So I'm going to park the data, and now let's talk about why all this happened. And there's a lot of pundits out there making great big statements about what's going on, and Gail Perry Group has our opinion about why all this happened. And first of all, I do think we've got to look at the external environment, things that we cannot change. I have always watched the media's role in bolstering nonprofit giving. And we don't think about, oh gosh, can I get an article in the local newspaper or blog or whatever, however news is disseminated in your community. But during the pandemic, national and local media attention was focused very much on the stories of people needing help during the pandemic. There were stories of brave doctors and nurses. There were stories of the healthcare workers working so hard. There were stories about George Floyd and racial injustice issues. Our issues were in food. Oh my gosh, food was very much in the national framework. And my husband and I increased our monthly gifts to our local food bank for that reason. And so the role of media has dropped away. The media is not really covering our issues anymore. So again, this is a factor outside of our control. And then inflation is a factor outside of our control that seriously impacted our results, as you can tell, as I've discussed earlier. But also, there's another great big bugaboo in all these numbers, and that is the stock market. Think about the stock market, everybody, because when the stock market is high, it increases a sense of economic well-being and prosperity among the Americans who are invested in the stock market. And I was talking to Catherine Gamble, my business partner, today, and she said that 50% of Americans are invested in the stock market. And the stock market went down, can you imagine this number, 25.4%. And a lot of that decline was at the very end of the year, a lot of volatility. So your mid-level donors, anybody who's making a gift of stock, mid-level and upper-level donors probably hit a little bit pause on their stock gifts because they didn't feel, first of all, their overall net worth was going down. 25% is significant when you're considering an individual's savings or assets or retirement fund. So these factors outside of our control, inflation, the stock market, and of course just the general volatility of the overall, the lack of media attention. So what else happened? Well, there is something that we can do something about, and that's part of the what happened story. And that is, um, we are seeing across the board in nonprofit and charitable organizations in the United States a, um, a lot of talk about staff burnout. During the pandemic, there was quiet quitting and there was the great resignation, and people left their jobs, including their jobs as fundraisers and donor stewardship people, staffers, and all aspects of fundraising. People left. And we have seen across the board in our clients, and we touch a lot of nonprofits because we have our 30 major gifts intensive participants that we get to know very closely. And then we have all of our capital campaign projects and consulting projects. So we see a lot of fundraising shops. And we're seeing such poor staffing. And these poor staffers who are left at these organizations are trying to do 5 jobs, and they're exhausted. And I'll tell you something: if you're trying to do planned giving, corporate giving, foundation grants, execute your annual appeals to the best of your ability, and just generally, and an event, or God help us, a golf tournament. I have a problem with board source sending something out about golf tournaments today, but we'll tackle that later. But the fact is that there are not enough people doing fundraising jobs, and that's totally impacting our results. Because there was a letter to the editor in the Chronicle of Philanthropy yesterday that was fascinating, from a donor who said he stopped giving to these nonprofits because his donor stewardship questions were not answered or responded to in a timely basis. So with too few people on fundraising teams, donors are not going to get the engagement and the attention that they need in order to stay interested in your nonprofit. So let me move on. Having analyzed the data, and we just talked about what really happened externally and internally in nonprofits. And I want to give you a little bit about the post-COVID fundraising outlook. And I'm worried that this year in 2023, our outlook is not great. And one of the reasons I say that is, even though stock market is back up, hooray, the stock market's back up, is that donations of $1 million or more compared so far this year, compared with so far last year, are down significantly. And there was a survey of both corporations and foundations that said that they are going to tighten their belts a little bit this year. So my action item for you is be very conservative about your fundraising goals this year. We see far too many fundraising goals that are just plug numbers in a budget. And we ask the fundraising team, how'd you get your goal? And they say it was given to us from on high. You don't set a fundraising goal unless you know how you're going to make the goal. Otherwise, you're just doing pie in the sky budgeting. And that, again, that's another topic for another day. So be careful in your commitments to performance evaluation and your fundraising performance between now and the end of the year. And I know a lot of organizations, we're looking at the end of the fiscal year right now. I think it's this week, isn't it? And people are making budgets for next year. Just be conservative. So let's talk about action items. And I'm still looking for some questions. If anybody has a question, and I'll also track questions and comments on this video after we're done, because I'm sure there'll be some activity on LinkedIn following this. Action items for you and your team and your board and your CEO regarding Giving USA and what you need to go forward. So set conservative fundraising goals. We've already talked about that. And I think you need, all right, I'm going to get on my soapbox here a little bit. We know how to do fundraising well. We know there's research, there's training, and we know much better this year than we did 10 years ago or 20 years ago how to do fundraising well. However, and the training's out there. I mean, our Major Gifts Intensive is a state-of-the-art program, and there are a lot of other great programs out there for everyone. Training is essential. You cannot shoot from the hip, writing your appeal letters, writing your thank you letters, guessing your way through your donor letters, guessing your way through all aspects of fundraising. Get your staff trained, okay? Going to a conference it may be considered a perk, but it's absolutely necessary to stay up to date with the state of the art, especially technology, AI, um, um, up and down. Keep up to date with fundraising and with trends and techniques and strategies, and also be willing to innovate. So set conservative goals, get your staff trained and up to date in how to do fundraising well. And that also means that you've got to educate your leadership, because your board members think they know more about fundraising than you do, probably. Your CEO may or may not, and your CFO may not understand fundraising. And when they slash the budget, they don't understand how they're shooting themselves in the foot in terms of revenue. So educating our leadership on how fundraising really works, it's got to happen. It's just got to happen, and you can do it. I know you can, or you can use some of our videos if you want to. Um, and so invest in fundraising and do it right. Yeah. Train your team. Yeah. And my last action item is that donor stewardship will save you, right? Good donor stewardship will save you. If you've got a donor asking a question, that means your donor cares enough to call or write and communicate, and it's a wonderful engagement opportunity. So your donor stewardship activities, all your donor relations activities are worth gold to you. Yes, that means you, Lynn Wester, my favorite guru of donor relations. It also means that perfecting your thank you notes, perfecting your post-gift donor and customer engagement, your donor newsletters. All of these things really matter, because all of the activities that you do in stewardship are prep for the next ask. And so Angela has just posted a question. Thanks so much, Angela. We're in a recession in Canada, she says, and the cost of living is horrible, really, and the average blue collar donor is taking a hit, and that is absolutely true. The smaller donors are drifting away, everybody, but they still love your work, and they'll do what they can. So maybe this is the time to just love them even more so that they'll come back to the fold. Invest in your post gift and your former donor love. You know, oh, and there's Catherine Gamble. She's in an airport traveling to see one of our clients. And Catherine says, in light of Giving USA results, should organizations spend time taking a deeper look at lapsed donors, survey them, talk to them, and focus on retention with new strategies? I think that's a brilliant question. Of course, Catherine, my partner, is far smarter than I am. But donor retention, how wonderful to focus right there. And we also know that board members do a great job thanking donors, and they can play a wonderful role in donor retention. And Angie says also that corporate giving is there, but yeah. We've got a lot of moving parts, and this recession issue is tough for Canadians. It's tough for the small donors. We have to love our donors a lot, educate our leadership, and don't hold back. Everybody, don't hold back. You have got to, yes, Angie says donor love always. We've got to stick with our fundraising strategies. We don't let up. We hire people, we invest in our fundraising and our messaging, and we do state-of-the-art fundraising. And I predict that your organization is going to be very successful in spite of the environment. Thanks so much for joining me. Thanks so much. I've talked far too long. Bye-bye.